It's a very good but also very difficult question, and indeed you could think that and observe also that at some point there are tipping points in this kind of changes in cities, and of course experimenting is one of the factors, but there are so many other factors. You know, it's a complex system with many factors and relationship, and of course not only what's happening in the streets, but what's happening around them, what's happening in the broader world, and maybe a way to get a kind of feeling for that. You use the example of Amsterdam, but of course Amsterdam was not always like this. So Amsterdam as a city where cycling is dominant is something that emerged in the 70s through a quite chaotic process, where there were plans that were totally not going that directions, where we're really making the city car-centric, and then popular protests, also kind of experiments and people, and in that, through that chaos, in the end, direction was changed and the cycling city emerged. So we need to understand those moments, like the 70s in Amsterdam, to understand how tipping points can happen. The first thing is to be aware of this issue. But if I had to think what could be ways to look for a way out, I think two things seem to me important. The first is to be aware of these processes and do something about them. And doing something means not letting just the market dynamics determine who's going to benefit. So you need interventions against the market in order to protect, for instance, people that are there that otherwise will be expelled, businesses, and it also means involving the people, the businesses that are there, because also what has been observed, even if you protect them from material way, what you develop is not their world, it's not speaking to them, it's made for others. So you also need to find what would be a change that is made for the people there, at least also for the people there. And the other issue, and some cities are going in that direction, is to not to do this intervention in different places, ideally everywhere, not just like in central districts or where privileged people are or might be becoming, which again leads to the point that you need also an overall vision. It cannot just be incremental, organic, otherwise you risk accelerating this process of exclusion that you are naming. Just transition one which related to what we just said, where you don't just have a transformation towards more livable, more sustainable city, but also one where the benefit and costs are equitably distributed among people. And I mean, it's not only typical, a key to things like city or streets, is maybe the question of our time. We need a transition of both just and sustainable, and we cannot just do one or the two. So we have to find a way of putting the two together. Again, in part is involvement, having the big picture, creating opportunities in multiple places, involving multiple people. So in that sense, it's just a repetition of what I said. But the other is that you need, at the same time, bottom-up developments, experiments, but also a top-down vision of idea how this could all come together. And I think one of the key questions, and really something where we are still struggling with, is how can we, these two dynamics, the bottom-up of experiments, more or less formalized. There's a lot of informal experimentation going on, and the top-down of policies and things led more by municipalities and longer-term, wider. How could they positively reinforce each other, which doesn't necessarily mean putting everything together, because they have a different role. There could be also, and I'll talk about it tonight, sort of positive friction between these two. I think what is key there is to shift to a street which is much more plural than the streets we have today. And an obvious shift is from streets dominated by car traffic to streets that also other ways of moving around have their place. But it's more than that. It's moving, and maybe that's an even more fundamental development that the car brought, is moving from streets that are mainly for movement, whatever the way, to streets that also are public spaces, where there's also space for playing, for socializing, just relaxing, commerce. And beyond people, there's also place for plants, animals, where nature is also more present. Of course, it's impossible to have everything everywhere. And then we go back to the idea, to the point of conflicts and tensions that need to be dealt with. So for me, the ideal street is also a process, a deliberation process. In each street or neighborhood, you find the mix, and you keep finding the mix through experiments, through dialogues that fits that place, that street. And ideally, this happens all over the place. I think that we should reach it by trying it out now. And I think that's the key things of experiments. It's not so much, doing a step and then another to get to some ideal world. No, let's try that ideal world to bring it here. Let's try it out, see what works, what not, what we need also at a bigger scale to make it possible. So I think the way to make that happen is to try and do it now. On one hand, that integrated policy is one that facilitates these local processes of different uses and the actors behind those uses coming together, trying out ideas, experimenting them. And again, it will never be final because things change, the world changes, people change. So on the other hand, you need to understand what kind of system-wide interventions you need to allow this to be possible. Just to use a concrete example, Barcelona and the superblocks. There is a very clear issue that where this transformation happens of the streets becoming from traffic or people, there is a big risk because it's 2 out of 3 streets, that the streets where traffic remain the key functions, get the traffic, get all, and the situation becomes there even worse. So crucial for the transformation to be equitable is that the total volumes of traffic diminish, that there are less cars and trucks. So that requires also citywide initiatives about new transportation system, car sharing, bike sharing, but also a published transport that's more accessible, et cetera, et cetera. So those things cannot emerge from each street. So you need also understand what are the conditions citywide that allow things to happen locally without, igniting these dynamics where the wins of some become the losses of others, or at least in a way there is acknowledgement and some compromise is found. In focusing on mobility in cities, at some point you also come into the notion that on one hand, we depend on mobility. We literally, individual households, organizations, cities. But on the other hand, our mobility practices are by no way sustainable. So it's a dilemma. It's a situation where we know we have to change, but we don't know how. And there is resistance to change. There is uncertainty. There is complexity. And it's at this point that I found inspiration first in evolutionary theories and even from many other fields, but then in things like transition studies, and there is where also the role of bottom-up dynamics, experiments, but also other kinds of dynamics became clear as a way in which complex systems can change. So that made me really interested in things like experiment, but it doesn't mean that I don't think that you also need top-down development. So in a way, it's in the end, for me, it was rebalancing. But I think you need both. Finding the way in which these two can work productively, whatever that means, is maybe the key challenge.
Thank you very much. That was
You're welcome.